you're sitting there having an existential crisis. These other countries are ripping us off.
Can you stop it? I think we're seeing the consequences that this isn't always a good idea.
Well, what can we do?
Can you imagine if you owned a business right now? How would you feel?
I think I'd be freaked out.
You don't know what that's like, but
yeah, I do know what it's like. But I got to tell you, right? There's so much going on right now that it's so confusing for the common man. In this 24-hour news cycle or whatever that we live in, Dean, it's like gold's up, crypto's down, gold's up, interest rates are going to go lower, reciprocal tariffs are off the table, and maybe now it almost seems now like Trump's closest advisors are like in his office and they've formed this circle around him, and the circle keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's basically forcing him to tone down the bullshit, right? And stop trying to act like you can govern the world's economics.
Yeah, I think there are some people that have been asked to leave the circle.
Okay, like who?
Probably like the guy Peter Navarro that created some of this tariff nonsense,
right?
Or at least the initial round that Trump tried to put out there.
Are these the reciprocal tariffs?
This is all about communication style. Yeah, right. The initial communication, right? This is all about communication style. All of this stuff could have been done behind closed doors. All of this could have been done in a way that is traditionally done, where two parties negotiate
behind closed doors.
But as we saw with Zelensky, this is not what our administration's going for.
No.
Right? They're going for on-camera audience.
Yeah. This guy's he's filming an episode of The Apprentice in real time.
And like Zelensky's one of the contestants.
Yeah.
Like, here we have, hey, try selling jelly beans to people on Fifth Avenue. Right. You're like, no, it's a war. Yeah. We got a pretty serious adversary in Putin. Yeah. Right? And today, if you saw like Trump's tweeting, Putin, stop bombing Kiev.
No, he called him by his first name.
Yeah, Vladimir.
He was like Vladimir. Yeah, Vladimir. Stop the nonsense.
Volodya, can you stop it?
Honestly, like,
it's pretty funny.
It is funny, but it's childlike.
You know what's not funny is that it's the economy. Our economy is a confidence game, and all of the events leading up to today over the last 3 or 4 weeks have put a chink in the armor of the confidence surrounding the economy.
That's right.
Because just like you and I can sit here for the last hour and talk about our business and talk about what we think will happen in the next 6 months and do a little bit of planning, every business owner, whether they run a Fortune 500 company or a local Jersey Mike's franchise, they're doing the same thing in their head, even if they don't know it, even if they have no one to talk to, right?
Yeah. So let me ask you something. If you're a business owner right now, and let's say, for example, you buy supplies, materials, or equipment, right, from overseas, could be China, could be Vietnam, somewhere in Asia. You're freaking out. You're freaking out about how much it's now going to cost to buy the same materials that you were buying 90 days ago, right? And it's completely essentially, right, this war hawking, right, has derailed your business. I mean, it's derailed your business to the extent where you're sitting there having an existential crisis. You're sitting alone in your office.
Yeah. And we could talk about like 2 real examples. We don't have to pretend like there's some weird existential crisis we don't know about. Yeah. All right. We know someone who sells Chinese trinkets on Amazon.
Yeah.
And that individual buys containers full of them every single month.
Right. And now
well, guess what? Yeah. There's a bunch of containers that are coming to the port. Those containers are going to be marked up 100 or 150%, right? The tariffs have to be paid. Well, guess what? He doesn't want to take them. And he has only given a deposit, because he has these long-standing relationships with his Chinese counterparts, only a deposit of between 0 and 30% on any containers, on any shipment. And so he's thinking like, pound sand, I'm going to leave these containers at the port. I don't want them at twice the cost. And yeah, he'll ruin his relationships with those Chinese suppliers long term, but he'll be free from making these large payments. You can imagine what a container costs filled with stuff.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't matter, right? You could be importing e-bikes, heavy equipment, CNC machinery, stone from China.
Oh, that's a great point. The CNC machine, that's another example, right? We know someone who has a CNC machine coming from China right now. It is at the port. And the seller of the CNC machine, that's kind of the middleman between the Chinese factory and this manufacturer in California, has to charge a tariff. That customer never agreed to that price when he ordered the CNC machine 6 months ago. And to make things more complicated, he has signed financing documents at the price that they agreed upon. And those payments have already commenced. He doesn't know what to do.
I think the only thing they can do is just let that piece of equipment or let that container collect dust. Because there's no way that you can import it, pay double, right? Or 2.5.
No.
Right? 2.5, 1.5.
But the lender wants to get paid. The contracts are signed.
But again, it's like a perfect example of like the reverberations, the secondary and tertiary effects of this bullshit, right? That the White House is doing. And again, I don't mean to make this political at all, because I think, Trump has a great point, which is, these other countries are ripping us off, right? We take all their shit, right? With no tariff or limited tariffs, but then they won't take ours, right? If we want to sell stuff if we want to sell stuff to the East, we've got to pay 100% tariffs, or not we, but people who want to buy American goods have to pay 100% tariffs on the imports, the imports from the United States. And I think it's interesting because what we're also not talking about is the US dollar, right?
It's down a little bit.
A little bit, right? So it actually, right, talk about it a little bit, but how does that affect people buying American goods?
Well, it makes it easier for them to buy American goods.
Which is kind of interesting, right?
Foreign goods more expensive for us.
Right. It's kind of interesting.
Tariffs plus a weak dollar, it's like a double whammy.
It's a double whammy, right? It's a double whammy.
Yeah. But to talk about Trump, and, people are very critical, obviously, and I'm critical. Hey, listen, this style of negotiating is a very Trumpy thing. And he has a lot of fans and they love how he does this stuff in public. I don't. And I think we're seeing the consequences that this isn't always a good idea. But I will say that on the topic of Jerome Powell, I don't love that he bullies him on camera, but Trump probably doesn't have a real easy, direct line to get at Jerome Powell. Jerome probably doesn't feel like he really needs to be talked down to over lunch at the White House. He's done well in life. He just doesn't need that. He's only got a year left in his tenure as chairman of the Fed. But Trump is probably right again, like he was 4 years ago,
pre-COVID,
to ask the Fed to lower rates. And you might say, well, why is that? Why would Trump be right to be begging the Fed for some reprieve? Because we're down almost 10% of the S&P 500 through the end of April. Maybe we'll be down 6, 7, 8%. Maybe it won't be 10 by the end of this month. Look at any example of any year where the S&P 500's been down this much for the first 4 months of the year. How did it recover to have a nice positive year? When did that happen? Well, it only happened twice. So we can look at 2020, the special COVID example, and we can look at 1982, Reagan's first term.
Okay.
That's it. All the other examples suck. You don't want any of the other examples to happen this year because no one will be happy. Not Trump, not me and you, right? Nobody. And so you look at 1982, you look at 2020, what happened? Why did the market turn around from May to December? Because the Fed took action.
Yeah, they took, yeah.
And I think going back to your point from the very beginning, there's a circle of people sitting around the president and they're telling him this specific thing, right? They know as much as I do that there needs to be some Fed action, some stimulus, and that could be fiscal, could be monetary, could be both, right? We get some tax cuts and some Fed action that the market and the economy, and most of all confidence, it needs a kick after they tried to drown it.
Yeah, dude, listen, if you can't lower rates, right? If Jerome Powell isn't going to play by your rules, which it seems like you said, right? He seems impervious to the intimidation tactics of Trump, right? There's some separate.
He wasn't last time. I mean, he did it.
Well, right, he caved. But if he's not going to cave, right, then what can we do, right? We can buy some bonds, right?
Yeah, short-term bonds, because nobody can tell what's going to happen with long-term interest rates. And this is one of the risks of trying to relive 1982. In 82, the Fed lowered rates, long-term rates came down, the market was very happy, everybody lived happily ever after. This year, we could be in for something different. You might get Powell to lower rates a bit, and long-term rates could stay stubborn and they could go up. And the dollar, even though it should go up when rates stay stubborn like that, it could go down. There's all kinds of interesting dislocations happening in the market that are not typical, that are happening in 2025 that we just haven't seen before. So a lot of unpredictable stuff. And again, these are the second and third order effects you're talking about. When you kick something, that thing gets kicked into something else, and that something else does a third thing that you can't even predict.
It's like they're sitting here with this whack-a-mole game, and they're like, well, right, we got to win this battle with tariffs. All right, so we're going to hit this. Now we've got tariffs. Okay, they tariffed us in return. All right, reciprocal tariffs. The markets are suffering, right? The common man, even if you did vote for Trump, I think what you're starting to do is you're starting to perceive that Trump's still your man in office, but there's people, namely Jerome Powell and others, that don't want to see him win. So now it's further entrenching in this belief that it's like Trump versus the deep state. And it's like, well, what can we do? Well, we'll just survive the next year until Jerome Powell's out, and we'll suffer through this. But again, that might be okay for the common man who's not an entrepreneur. But I think, again, if you have exposure,
it's okay for my next door neighbors.
Right. Yeah.
It's not okay for other people.
Right. Well, I think
got that kind of time.
Who it's not okay for is the entrepreneur. What I'm seeing in the market today, just based off of the KPIs and the dashboards that we have, that sort of illustrate, right, this lack of confidence that the entrepreneurs have in the economy. They're willing to kick the tires on borrowing capital, but then they're not willing to pull the trigger. And that sort of confidence issue is a real pullback from where we were, 30 days ago.
And you can't blame them.
No, not at all. But I would argue this is the time to borrow money, because whether the cost of money goes up or down over the next 90 days, you may not have access to it. Right?
Absolutely.
Because if you're looking to lock in your rate, Cardiff can still get you business funding today. Don't wait till it's too late. Dude, take the money, get the funding, right? And make great decisions. And if, 30 days, 60 days down the road, again, market dynamics change, or you feel like you've made a bad decision and where you've put your dollars on that roulette table, great, pull back, move the money, do something else. But don't sit on the sidelines and watch your competitors that are bigger, stronger, and faster take your market share. Right? There's a story to be told about the entrepreneur that fails to make decisions, and it's a cautionary one. Right? Make the decision today, get funded for your business, and use Cardiff. So that's all I really had to say.
All great points.
Yeah. All right, man. I'm out of here. I'll see you next time.